Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And we're starting now. We're continuing. We're starting our third shiur, which is going to have Gemara from continuation from yesterday, Shiur Zayin. Yesterday, we actually started the sugya of Yiush Mida'as. And the sugya of Yiush Mida'as was talking about what happened if somebody forgot something. He lost something. Let's go to this case. Let's just review yesterday quickly. The person lost this object right here, right? He lost this object. And he wasn't sure. Let me just get a color. Okay, so the person lost this object right here. In the place at 1 o'clock. He lost it at 1 p.m. This was his bag of corn chips. The person found it, the finder picks it up at 2 o'clock. And, right, the owner left the object behind. If he would have known that it was lost, he would have given up hope. But over here, he was miyayish later on at 4 o'clock. So we have a new concept, which is called itmar. We learned in the Gemara, Yiush shaloi midas. What happens if somebody is miyayish, but he didn't know enough about it to be miyayish? Abaya or meloi have yish. Abaya says it's not yish. Rava amahava yish, and Rava says it is considered yish. Again, the question is, what would we say if somebody would have known? He would have been yayish, but over here he didn't know. So that's the question. Do we? And the Gemara later on, we're going to see that it's even a little bit more complicated because we're going to bring in things about a carbon. Okay, so let's just go to the second part. And then we said here are the three possibilities of cases. Some of them, Abaya and Rava agree that it's not yish. When we say it's not yish, it's something that he expects to get back. Abaya and Rava agrees that it is yish and something that he has no chance of getting back. And Abaya says it's not considered yish, and Rava says it is considered yish in these cases. Again, this three-color chart, blue, green, yellow, we're going to have throughout this sugya of Yiush Midas. So get used to it, and we're going to stack things under it. So the Gemara says, "B'davar sheyesh by siman," and something that does have a siman, kuli amalai pligi to have a yish. Everybody agrees the lay have a yish. It's not yish. So here, a siman is going to go right over here. We're going to talk about something that has a siman, because it's not going to be considered yish because he expects it back. Va'afagaf the shaminan, afagaf, even though the shaminan comes from the word shema. You can see, like I said before, you can see sometimes the Hebrew in the Aramaic, the shaminan, we hear from him, the miyayish l'saif, even if he was miyayish later on, loy have a yish. The chi asaliyade, when it came to his hand, the isura hu the asaliyade. So let's go back and do this carefully. Okay, so we started with a memra. The rule is a memra is a statement, and we just did this briefly yesterday. Usually a memra begins a new sugya, right? Usually a memra is a new sugya. You start off, it's not often that you find a memra followed by another memra, but over here, why is it a memra? Because it doesn't ask, it doesn't answer, it doesn't prove, it doesn't disprove anything. So it's a statement, therefore we consider it a memra. And Shiur Zayin, we learned, let's go over the text, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, in Shiur Zayin, we learned about the shitas of Abaya and Rava in a case of Yiush Midas. And after learning that shiur, it may seem that Abaya and Rava argue in all cases. However, we see that that's not always the case. Some cases are so obvious, right, that he's not going to give up hope, that they would both agree, like this one here, but davar sheyesh by siman, that it is not considered yish because he fully expects to get it back. And we'll see cases on the other side too. However, we learn in the shiur it's not so. We're up to here, okay? Then there are some cases in Yiush Midas where both Abaya and Rava agree that it's not considered yish, and the finder may not keep it because the guy didn't give up hope. There are also cases in which they both agree that it is considered to be yish, and the finder may keep it. We divide all these cases of Yiush Midas in these three categories. Now the Gemara is going to begin. Okay. First, we'll discuss, we're right here now, okay? First, we will discuss the case in which Abaye and Rava agree that Yiush Mida'as is not considered Yiush, and the finder may not keep it because there was no Yiush and because he expects to get it back. So let's go to the Gemara. B'davar sheyesh by siman, in something that does have a siman, if it does have, in a case of a thing, an aveda, that has a siman, let's remember again, the brackets mean something between the words, that's like a whisper. Parentheses explains the translation word, okay? So if you, again, let's just do this as an exercise. If you were, we did this before, but let's just do it again as a review. If you were translating just the words, and if you had an Aramaic dictionary, you really wouldn't be doing that well if you didn't know the rest of it. So bidavar is in a thing, sheyesh, that has, by in it, siman, a sign. Which thing? What's this talking about? Okay, so that's why we have. So in a case of the situation that we're talking about, a thing, what's the thing? An aveda, sheyesh by siman, that has a siman. It has an identifiable sign on it. So we know, we weren't there, but we can assume that the person will never be miyayish. Kuli amalai pligi, everyone doesn't argue, which it's just, right? It's the same thing as saying everyone agrees. Nobody argues. The loy have yish. Everybody agrees that it's yish. That it is not considered that the owner is giving up hope. It's not considered yish. Therefore, the finder may not keep it. Okay, so that goes in this category that Abaye and Rava agree that it's not considered yish. Okay, let's go. Let's the text right here. If the Metzia has a siman, all Amoraim, the Amoraim all agree that it is not considered that the owner has been miyayish. Why? Because we say, the Gemara is going to explain, this halacha doesn't change even if he's miyayish later on. So let's go. Va'af al gaf, and even though the shaminan minei, that we hear from him, shama is to hear, we hear from him the miyayish l'saif, even if we find out, let's say a day later, he gets fed up and says, you know what, even though there's a siman, I'll never find it. Loi have a yish, it's still not considered. Okay, we're up to here in the translation side. It is still not considered that the owner had given up hope by the time the finder found it, right? We got to give Rabbi Spivak a round of applause. Look how much he helped us with this translation. Okay, Loi have a yish, it is still not considered that the owner had given up hope by the time the finder found it. Later, he did give up hope. And the reason it's not considered yish, why do we say that it's not considered yish? Dichi asa liyade, remember yad is a hand, another Aramaic word. Dichi asa, that's similar to Hebrew. Dichi asa liyade, because when it came to the finder's hand, the isura, when it was forbidden at a time that the finder was forbidden to keep it. Here we go, just one, see that? Isura means forbidden. But here we go. Thank you, Rabbi Spivak, again. At a time that the finder, okay, at a time that the finder was forbidden to keep it, who the asaliyade, that's when it came to his hand. So let's just go back to that diagram from yesterday's shiur, the timeline, that was so helpful. So again, the chi asaliyade, when it came to his hand, this is what we're talking about, exactly 2 o'clock. This is a 2 o'clock discussion. This piece of Gemara is talking exactly what happened at 2 o'clock. And what happened? Guy goes to pick up the object, and the fellow says, they bet he will find out later that he can't keep it, even if we find out at 4 o'clock that he was miyayish, because when he picked it up, he wasn't allowed to pick it up. So therefore, it's considered illegal to keep. Okay, let's go back again. Why was the finder forbidden to keep it? Why shouldn't he keep it? The lechiyada, 4 o'clock. You know, that's a good idea. Let's try this one. Afal gaf de shaminan. Even though we hear, when do we hear? 4 o'clock. 4 p.m. Okay, right? So when did we hear that he was miyayish? 4 o'clock on the bus. He told the guy next to him, he says, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get this back. I'm miyayish right now. Okay, so even though, we need another 4 here. So afal gaf, even though the shaminan that we hear, the miyayish, l'saif, that he eventually at 4 o'clock he was miyayish, lai have a yish. Why? When did it come to his hand? 2 o'clock. I think I'm getting better at this slowly, guys. Not great, but I think I'm getting better. When it came to his hand, the isur, 2 o'clock, the isuru the asaliyade, right? At 2 o'clock, he wasn't allowed to keep this because the guy didn't give up hope, right? He didn't find out about it till 4 o'clock. So this is what he's saying. The lechiyada, the nafalmine, that we knows it fell from him. What time is that, guys? Right? 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, when he knows that it fell from him, lamiyayish. Meimar Amar, it's possible that even at 4 o'clock, the Gemara takes it another step now. Even perhaps at 4 o'clock, he won't be miyayish. When he finds out that it fell from him, lamiyayish, perhaps he won't be miyayish then. Meimar Amar, he will say, Simana Isla Begava, I have a simon there. I'll go over the translation again. Yahivna Simana, I'll give the simon, B'shakil Nalei. So look what he's saying. So let's go back and then we're going to do the translation again. So when determining whether a finder may keep a mitzvah, the only moment in time that matters is the moment the finder found it. And that was 2 o'clock, right? So the only moment that matters is 2 o'clock when the guy found it. At that moment, even if he already known that he lost his object, maybe he wouldn't have been miyayish. That means even Abaya and Rav would both agree. After all, his object has a simon. He would have been confident that he could provide the simon and get back his object. Now, let's stop right here for a minute and go back to the picture. So why is it here? Okay, guys, question. Why here is there a disagreement between Abaya and Rava? Well, look at the object here. This bag of potato chips does not have a simon. Remember, this does not have a simon because it looks like every other potato chip bag. It's not we said yesterday, it's not his mother's cookies, and he didn't write on it, this is Yankees. So therefore, even if he would have known about it, he may not have been miyayish. So even Abaya and Rava will both agree in this case. Okay, let's get back to this line here. So it was only later, sometime after the finder found it, that the owner gave up hope of finding it. When that happened, the finder had already become obligated to return the mitzvah. Once the finder is chayiv to return the mitzvah, the fact that the owner is miyayish does not change the halacha. Okay, so let's go back here. So Abaya and Rava agree that it's not considered yish. Now let's see what happened here. Instead of losing a bag of corn chips that everything looks the same, unfortunately, very sadly, he left his tefillin behind. You see, he left his tefillin on the bus at 5 o'clock. His dismissal was 5 o'clock. 5:30, somebody else on the bus picks it up. Okay, you see that right there. So this guy, so the first case, what's the difference? The first case was a bag of corn chips. Here, and by corn chips, Abaya and Rava would have a disagreement. If this was corn chips, then they would have a disagreement right here. But since there's a simon, the next morning when he goes, when this fellow here left his tefillin on the bus, right? This guy's the one who lost it, this fellow here. So he goes the next morning in his room and he starts looking around for his tefillin. He thinks to himself, I lost my tefillin, but it had my name on it. So I'm sure that I'll get it back. So Abaya and Rava both agree that in this case, it's not considered yish. Okay? Now, so this box we filled in already. They agree that it's not yish. Again, they agree that it's not yish, b'davar sheyesh b'sim, something that has an identifying sign. Let's find out here. Can we fill this in with something? Is there something that they both agree that it's yish? So let's go back. Let's right here follow the bouncing red line. Now the Gemara will tell us about the cases in which Abaya and Rava agree. Abaya and Rava agree that Yish Mida'as is considered Yish, and the finder may keep it. So what would that be? Says the Gemara, Bizutoy Shel Yam, in the high tide of the sea. Okay, thank you, Rabbi Spivek. if the object was swept away in the high tide of the sea. Now, tide is the oceans. It has to do with gravity and the moon and other things like that. But the oceans get a little bit higher sometime during the day and sometimes get a little bit lower. Sometimes if you're driving near a beach or an ocean, or sometimes even a bay, if it's open and close to the ocean, you'll see sometimes it looks a little bit higher than other times. And if you look in the newspaper, if you go online and you look for high tides of the day, it will tell you exactly when it's going to be. So sometimes it gets a little bit higher, and sometimes it's a little bit, and sometimes it could be a lot, it could be a few feet. So what happened? Let's say the tide was very low, and the guy put his bag down, or he put a t-shirt of his, and overnight the sea gets bigger, and it flows away, it takes it away. Uvashililasa shel nahar, or that's a long word, shelilasai, in the overflow of. That means there was raining a lot. As the tide has nothing to do, if it rains, the sea doesn't really get higher. But a river collects water from a very large area. And we all know, right, when it rains, it flows down to the river, and the river gets bigger. So if he put his t-shirt not by a sea, by an ocean, on a beach or something like that, but he left it on the side of a stream. And he came home that night, and overnight there was a huge thunderstorm, and the river schlepped it away. Afal even though there is space siman, it could say his name on it. It could say Yakov Horowitz on the back of the t-shirt. Rachmana, the Torah, Sharyeh, made it permissible. Rachmana Sharyeh, the Torah made it permissible. Like we're going to learn later on. Okay, so later on we're going to learn that if the yam, or if the nahar, if an example, just a physical example of an ocean or a river, if it took it away, he has absolutely no hope of getting it because it's downriver now. So even if it has a siman, it won't make a difference. Okay, the Gemara will say it's okay to keep because of. So let's go back so let's go back here. Okay, so later on, let's do the text here. Later on in the sugya, we will learn that the regular halachas of Aveda only apply to something that the owner has lost, and we learn it from a pasuk, but it's accessible to other people. It's Aveda, it's lost to him, but Mitsuya Eitzel Kaladam, other people could find it. That's when it's considered an Aveda. However, and we're going to learn it from a pasuk, be patient, we'll get that to the pasuk later. If the Aveda was lost not only to the owner, but it's also unreachable by people in general, such as an object that was swept away by the sea, right, or of overflowing river, then if someone manages to get it, he can keep it regardless of whether it has a siman. It doesn't matter whether the owner says he was miyayish or not. The Torah says, fine, they could keep it. And we'll see from a pasuk how we learn that. This is because we assume that the owner was miyayish, even if he doesn't admit it. Therefore, if an object was washed away by a river and it's a situation of Yiush Mida'as, there is no machlokes. Both Abai and Rava agree that the finder may keep it. So now we filled in 2 out of 3 boxes. If there's something that has a siman, if there's something that has an identifying object, then he's right. He expects to get it back, and he won't be miyayish. And then we have a special pasuk that teaches us that if a river overflows or a sea gets higher and carries it away, then they all agree that he could keep it. Now again, it's the explanation is that it says an aveda is something that one person lost, Ruvain lost it, but Shimon could find it. But in Shlilase Shel Nahar, if something just went downstream, Shimon can't find it either. Maybe somebody will find it a few miles down, but it's so unlikely that if somebody downriver finds something, he can assume that it's his to keep. Okay, ki pligi, when do they argue? And now we're going to go back to the case that we said. Okay, ki pligi, when do they argue? When do they argue? In other words, what is this talking about? This one right here, this box that says Abaya says it's not Yish, and Rava says it is Yish. when does that apply? So the Gemara is going to tell us, ki pligi, when do they argue? Bedavar she'ein by siman. If something doesn't have a siman, remember, like we had before, right? The bag of corn chips is not like tefillin that has a siman. The bag of corn chips has no siman. So Abaya Amar, now this is really just a review. Remember, this is just a review of what we said before. But what this Gemara wants to point out, that there are some, don't think that they argue in every case. They sometimes, Rabbi and Rava will say it's not Yiush, for example, something that has a siman. And sometimes Rabbi and Rava will say it is Yiush, and that has to do with Zuta Shal Yam or Shalasa Shal Nar. Something comes along that there's just no way that the person ever expects to get it, like so now, what do they argue about? The case that we had before. So if the object does not have a siman, back to the Rabbi Spivak's text, and is lost in a way that people will be able to find it, right? Not like the river. There's a machlekes in the case of Yiush Mida'as. Now we're going to, this is a review. Remember, this isn't new. We learned this before, and we'll explain the reason. Abaya says, lo have a Yiush. It is not Yiush. Daha lo yada the nafal minei. How did he know? He didn't know that it fell. He didn't know that it fell. So how could he be miyayish? Abaya says, see the text. Abaya says that since the owner does not know that the object had been lost, he could not have been miyayish. It doesn't matter that he would have been miyayish if he would have known it was lost. Bottom line, when the finder found the object, the owner had not yet been miyayish. Therefore, the finder may not keep the mitziyah, just like we had in this case. So when he gets it on the bus, and he's miyayish now, it doesn't make a difference because the guy picked it up when he wasn't supposed to. I think we're going to stop here. Okay, so now, when we finished this sugya, we're going to go over what Rava says, and we're going to review again this case and go do our homework sheets on this. Okay, I hope you found it helpful. Let's do one very, very quick review. And it's really just explaining what we said. So now we said like this, that another memra, it's a statement that says they don't argue everywhere. Sometimes they agree that it's Yiush, sometimes they agree it's not Yiush, and in the middle is where the action is. That's where we have a disagreement. So b'davar sheyesh by siman, kulam like everybody says that it's not Yiush. Why? Even though we hear that he was miyayish, eventually it's not Yiush, because when it came to his hand, it was forbidden to take, because when it fell, he's not going to be miyayish. He'll say, I have a siman. As soon as I give the siman, I'll collect it, because it's tefillin, right? It's not a case of corn chips. Bezuta shel yam, if it's in a high tide of the sea, u'shilasa shel nar, and the overflow of a river, af al gaf, even though there is space siman, even though there is a siman, rachmana sharye, the Torah says it's mutter, kidbainan lamemar lakaman, like we're going to say later on. Kipligi, they argue, if there is a siman, Abaya says lo have a Yiush, it's not Yiush. The halayada did not from him. He didn't know that it fell from him. And we're going to stop right here. Okay? Have a wonderful day, everyone. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Be well, everyone.